Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today on the podcast, I speak with David Brown, who is Event Director for the Emergency Services Show. Emergency Services Show is the UK's leading event dedicated to transforming our emergency services. They feature over 450 exhibitors displaying the absolute latest equipment on the market. They've got live interactive demos, they've got unique continued professional development, accredited seminars, and it's absolutely fantastic. I've been going there for probably the past 10 years or so, and obviously in this incredibly challenging time, they have not put an event on in 2019 because of the government restrictions. They've had their hands tied in the proverbial sense, not in the exciting sense, and they are getting ramped up, ready to kick off in September of 2021. And today I share a conversation with David about how the industry has been operating behind the scenes, some of the exciting things we've seen. How did the Emergency Services Show even get started? What was its origins? How did the conversation first happen? What was the first event? A big thanks once again to our long-term sponsor, William Wood Watches, who bring us, of course, our Chivalrous Collection, Bronze Edition, Valiant Collection, and coming to 2021 from the 1st of March is their new Triumph Collection. William Wood Watches has the vision to be the leading sustainable watch brand that upcycles rescue service materials for a new life, once forgotten, now reborn. People that wear these watches know they represent. They know that it is not just a timepiece. They're a statement of unity, respect, and bravery, which anyone wearing on our watch can proudly feel like they share that value with anyone else they see wearing it. It's like that badge of pride. It's like that symbol that you believe in something greater. If you want to become part of the William Wood Watches family, head over to williamwoodwatches.com, where Johnny and the team have some beautiful, beautiful pieces to share with us. Like I said, in March of this year, you will see the new Triumph Collection being launched. I had a sneak peek at it the other day. It's absolutely stunning. Hope you get in there and have a look. Only the top 100 existing customers who have been hand-picked by William Wood Watches get to have a glimpse at this before it goes on sale. So get over, have a look, get yourself registered, and check out some of the incredible stuff at williamwoodwatches.com. Massive shout out and thank you to one of our new sponsors, Venari Group UK. Quality builder of emergency vehicles, unrivaled degree of quality, passion, obsession for customer satisfaction, and they drive that British manufacturer to its fullest. We had Ollie as a guest on the podcast quite some time ago. I was up there not too long ago checking out their British built Z-Class air crash truck. I mean, that thing is pretty incredible. You know, I'm a big kid in a toy shop when I see some of the incredible vehicles that Venari is putting out there on the front line to keep all of our boys and girls in the emergency services safe and sound when they are out there helping people in the community, kicking ass and taking names. This really is a show and a moment in time every year that, you know, people from all emergency services, we talk about, you know, equality and diversity, and we talk about inclusion. This really is the epitomization of what is equality and diversity, what is inclusion. This is for all services. This is for all of our police, fire, paramedic, our voluntary services, our lowland rescue, our coast guard. You know, we see some incredible people exhibit at this wonderful event, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing some of the outcomes and some of the stories that David shares with us about some of the big challenges they've faced and also what we can expect in 2021. Thank you once again for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. I really appreciate your time. We really are hunting out some wonderful people. David is a great example of a guest that has such value added to the industry over the years, and I know you're going to enjoy it. I will see you on the other side.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. Or good afternoon, even, just. How are we doing, David? You all right, brother?
How you doing?
I am wonderful, my friend. And you good self?
Yeah, good. Can you hear me all right? My Mac has crashed, so I'm doing this on the phone.
I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Well, perfectly is an exaggeration, but I can hear you very well.
Good. Just had back-to-back Zoom meetings with the company, 5 or 6 hours of Zoom.
Oh, crikey.
It's so heavy going. And it's really sort of being patient. This second or third lockdown has been really, really tough. We're lucky, you know, some of the shows that we've got, one of them is in facilities. You know, on a lot of the police, fire and ambulance websites, they've got a graph of their expenditure, and obviously wages and pension is the biggest spend. So the second is facilities.
Oh, really?
Buildings. Yeah, it's huge.
You know what? No, that absolutely makes 100% sense to me. And as our as the response side of, certainly I'll just speak from the fire service, has certainly decreased in like the last decade. What we have not done a relative accommodation for is, like you've said, the size of the facilities that we utilize is far larger now than it needs to be. It's not fit for purpose in terms of size, as watches and stations have slowly decreased in size. And I can speak solely for our station's far too big for us. And all of these are going through those reviews in terms of outgoings, costings, looking forwards, because like you've said, that's certainly an aspect that people need to be thinking about. And this is where you can start seeing control services sharing resources, sharing facilities, because like you said, we need to get a lot cleverer and outsourcing things like our pension schemes and our payrolls and stuff like that to non-emergency services personnel, which often, rightly or wrongly, is a bit cheaper. Yeah,
but if you go back to, I suppose, turn of the century 2000, when it was the ODPM, the government department that the fire service was under, you had John Prescott, who was pushing for regionalisation, and he was just too soon. Yeah, he was too soon for his time. And if you
he wasn't received very well, was he? He was not. People didn't agree with him.
No, but now I bet you chief fire officers would absolutely give their right arm and look at regionalisation.
Oh yeah. And he'd be riding in on a white horse, saying something like that, and they'd go, "Oh God, let's all get behind him."
Yeah, but it's so funny. Everything is timing, isn't it? And if it's the wrong time,
everything's timing. I say to people with so many things, no means no right now. That's what no really means. Yeah. In everything in life. And this is just the serial optimist in me, everything's up for grabs, everything's an option, everything's for sale, everything. Do you know what I mean? It just might not be right now. And that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. And this is where biggest aspects, the biggest tools that I think are serving people best now are that mental fortitude and having built that mental fortress, the proverbial mental fortress where people are able to sustain, to keep the path, to keep the to keep going. Do you know what I mean? Being able to not be too wasteful. Do you know what I mean? Begin overtaking with substances, not being clever with their money, becoming abusive in the home, in their relationships and things like that. How do you, I forget what president that said it, but, keeping your head when all around you are losing theirs. Very, very famous line, which always resonates with me. That is the biggest aspect. And I see a lot of that in the emergency services. I think there's a nice segue in there somewhere for us as well.
Yeah, you're so right. But it's uncharted territory we're in. Yes. Nobody's been through. I think that's the optimism that you've got to hang on to. That, yes, it is tough now, but look out.
I always say to people that the world belongs to the learner. In this time, more than ever, the art of communication, and that ultimately is the biggest gift for me. And also having little to no, not pride, but willingness to be open and accepting of other people's advice and different approaches. Because I've accidentally, as I'm sure would be with anybody that made a big mistake, is I've messed a lot of things up in the past, be it with a business venture or a behavior I wasn't well enough aware of. And I've luckily feel like I'm 31 years of age now, and I've come out the other end of that, and I've got a great deal of self-awareness. I've got a great deal of ability to look at things dispassionately.
It's so interesting you should say that, because a lot of the people you talk to, there is adversity that's happened in their life. There's things in their closet that's happened to them that's given the driving force.
A lot of people don't realise, this old iceberg illusion, isn't it? They don't see the 10,000 hour rule that precedes, David Brown sitting at the head of the emergency services show, with whatever it is, 450 exhibitors displaying their goods and going, oh God, well, it's easy for David. And you're like, well, okay, maybe.
Nobody sees the sleepless nights and the stress and why should they?
No. And they shouldn't. And that's it. That's the bit there where you've got to get over yourself. You don't need to keep telling your story all the time, Pete. When people are interested, then yes, your mess is your greatest message.
But you know what, Pete? The other thing is, I think part of being successful is also never being satisfied.
Yes.
So
yes,
I can put on a great exhibition. I could get record visitors there and great feedback. But every single show, we send an email requesting feedback from exhibitors and from visitors, and it's always that one comment that is so unfounded
Yeah.
and so untrue.
It's cutting.
But somebody has come up with it, and it just absolutely gets under your skin.
Yeah.
And you can have so many, great show. They get boring. And then all of a sudden, this one comes along, and it just swipes the carpet from your feet.
Yeah.
And you just think, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah. And why does it bother me so much?
and that's what drives you on.
Yeah,
you know?
and people, sometimes we call it the tortured genius or anything like that. Not to say that you or I are self-proclaimed geniuses, but it is that aspect of always wanting more. And I say to people, I'm very open about addictions in a previous life, and people go, "Oh, wow, it's great that you've got over your addiction." I said, "Not really, because I'm still an addict. An addiction is a characteristic. It's a character trait." And we
Did it just go on to something else?
Yes, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. We call it addiction because it has a negative connotation to it, but if you were an artist, we'd call it passion. If you're a businessman, we'd call it drive. It's all the same thing to me. So the fact that I now pursue that in business, people would say I'm driven. The fact that I do that in sport, people would say I'm passionate or I'm disciplined. When ultimately, it's only if I place that character into a bad environment, it then becomes an addiction. So it's just an aspect of a greater self-awareness. Yeah. And I feel very lucky that I had certain people in my life that helped me realize that, and now I find it to be very much a secret weapon. But it's
understanding and it's knowing what those triggers are, and equally it's knowing what the triggers are to get over it.
Anyway,
very much so.
We're around the round houses.
Yeah, anyway, that's it. I'll finish. Bye.
Thanks, cheers. But I really appreciate that, David. It's lovely to hear that the surrounding parts there as well. Wonderful.
This is the first one I've done, by the way.
Is it really? First of many, I hope. First of many. Hopefully, I leave a good feeling in your loins, and you go away going, you know what, that was all right. It was a laugh.
Yeah, it helped being interviewed at the show last. I was going to say last year. Gosh, it was 2019. On the first morning, two of the visitors were travelling to the show and were listening to Chris Evans on Virgin.
Yeah. And
he just said to them, "Oh, where are you going?" And they said, "Oh, we're on our way to the emergency services show." And he said, "Hey, cool, what's that all about?" And so they started saying, and they said, "Oh, can you get the organiser to
give us a ring,
to give me a call and get in contact?" And I had so many phone calls from chiefs and various other people saying, "David, you're on radio. They want to contact you."
Yeah.
So our marketing company or PR company contacted them, and the next thing I knew, I was on radio with Chris Evans because he loves his vehicle. And when you're put on the spot, and he said, "Well, what's the sexiest thing? What's the biggest vehicle you got there?" And I was going, London Fire Brigade. They've got the new 100-meter turntable ladder that they didn't have at Gren for that, and it hadn't been made yet. And how much is that? I go, it's £100,000 and it's £1 million.
So that's where a podcast is like that, but better, because we can edit the whole thing post-production. So, David Brown, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How you doing, boss?
Brilliant, thank you, and delighted to be speaking with you.
That's my man. So we have sort of interacted and sort of overlapped in a couple of circles, because I've attended the Emergency Services show probably consistently for the best part of a decade since I first joined the fire service. Brilliant. And the bug was very fresh within me. But we spoke before we came on about being that bit of an addict. I seem to have keep coming back, even though I know I come away with 1,000 ideas and demand things of my own fire service that I never quite managed to get. But for people that are unfamiliar with you, you are event director, Emergency Services Show, which, for anybody that's unsure, lives outside. It's the UK's leading event. You transform services featuring 450 exhibitors, displaying all the sort of latest market innovations, and you interact with the public about some of the biggest things. And this is like a 2-day event, which we've had every single year. When did it first start?
Launched the show in 2006.
Really?
So just go back to your intro there. It makes it so much easier that you've been to the show and you're familiar with the event, and you see how important it is to the sector to have an event like that representing it, which looks professional, and it's got so much leading equipment suppliers there.
Oh, it has. I think people that initially hear it, when I remember trying to describe it the first time I'd been, I says, I went down to the Emergency Services Show, sort of at the arena, and it was absolutely amazing. And people were like, What's that? People just like squirting hoses and swinging batons around because they assume it's like some sort of village fete where there's a police person running around with a police dog, and I'm like, no, this is equipment that is literally on the precipice. It's stuff that's not even out yet. It's directions they're trying to take with equipment. And a lot of this stuff, for better or worse, sometimes comes out of some horrific incidents as well. So if there's a death in one of the emergency services, or if there's been a huge policy change or an incident where something has been learned, this is the tip of the sword. 2006 was the first event. How did you actually come up with the idea? Because it must have been I've tried to organise small events before, and this is no small feat to try and come together.
No, and it's an interesting question. My background is publishing. And I first started working on Fire magazine way back in 1988. So I've been with the industry for a very, very long time.
Fire magazine. For people that are unfamiliar with that, it might sound very obvious, but this was like the earlier version before people started seeing the physical shows being ran, wasn't it? Yeah. So 88, I started with Fire magazine, and they... the company also organised the annual. Do you remember CFOA or CACFOA? Yeah,
CACFOA,
Chief, I remember CFOA. Chief Fire Officers Organisation.
So prior to CFOA, it was CACFOA, and they had the contract to organise the annual show. And I started on Fire magazine, and I just absolutely loved it. And I said to my colleague, we were walking around the show, and I said, I'm going to run this one day. And he looked at me, are you sure? Because you got the magazine. I said, no, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And 1990 was the first time I became sales manager for it.
Christ, and that's a small window. You definitely went after them.
Grown. Yeah, it absolutely grown. And you know, not only the fire exhibition, but I also introduced smaller events at the Fire Service College, like extrication, hazmat, airport fire, and it's just gone on from that. I've just loved the industry, and every time I've kind of wanted to leave the market, something else fell in my lap, and like I launched Fire Middle East in Bahrain.
Really?
I did Fire Africa in Johannesburg, and some fantastic experiences.
What is it that keeps drawing you back to it? Because I had this conversation with a few different people from the industry, from Orelli and Oliver North, different members of different companies, and they have said they've worked in marketing or sales in one sector, and then they've thought they were taking a step away, and then accidentally found themselves gravitating back to it. And a lot of them reference sort of the moral value and what the industry in itself stands for. What was it about the emergency services? Because a man of your skill set can apply those skills in any aspect of public or private business, really.
It was just really an understanding, and it's the people. It's you guys, and it's an industry. From a marketing point of view, it's a marketer's dream, because every single day in the news, there is something. Now, it could be horrific, it could be a Grenfell or tsunami or whatever, but every single day, there is never a day when there's not the police, the fire, the ambulance are on that. And then you scratch under the surface, and there's mountain rescue, there's lowland rescue, there's the RNLI, there's the Coast Guard. And it just goes on, and there's it's the voluntary sector as well. These people put their lives, sort of at risk on the line, and they're volunteers. And I think just all that.
It's so unique, isn't it? So few sectors really, really have that. And like you've said, you can't control the controllables is what I always say to people. We can't stop these tsunamis happening. And yes, we can put in place laws and certain safety aspects to try and mitigate all of these other human interacted disasters from happening. But ultimately they are going to happen. And these, whilst they often show the worst side of humanity, they also show the best side. They show an opportunity for people of our sector to step up and bring the best of their skill set, their communication, their leadership aspects, and our technological aspects to the forefront for a cause that is full of goodness and moral value, and that people of the community can identify as something that stands for something meaningful.
Yeah, you got it. And then if you sort of roll on the years to 99, the wonderful Daily Mail took the company or a subdivision. And I absolutely hated it. They just wanted round people in round pegs.
Yeah.
And they just completely and utterly stopped innovation, and it stopped your mind thinking. So I left and started on Fire Times. And with that, that's another publication. And then I saw a gap in the market listening to equipment suppliers. So if you take a light bar manufacturer, they were saying to me, well, we don't want to advertise in 3 different magazines because there's the ambulance market, there's the police market, and there's the fire market. Yeah. Why can't anybody just come along with one magazine to suit them all? Because at the end of the day, a fleet manager, very, very important role, but it's the same. It's the same mentality. So I dipped my toe in launching Emergency Services Times, and I was told by 1 or 2 people, it'll never work, it'll fail, there's no such thing. And then September, that was in 2000, and September 11 came along and just completely and utterly rewrote the history books.
Yeah. It woke everybody up to the importance of the emergency services as well. I'm not saying like, everybody should think we're important, but I don't ever see there being a time, and it's an extreme statement to make, where this is not going to be a crucial aspect of our social structure, that we have people who are willing to protect and rescue those in need. And I think those that are in need are now in greater numbers and to far, far greater severity than there ever have been.
Yeah, and it's the ramifications from it. And so I suppose way back there, it was the first time I heard the C word, collaboration. Yeah. And between the emergency services, slowly beginning to work together. And then there were just so many different incidences. We had flooding. In the early 2000s, the flooding was just unbelievable.
Yeah. And we've only seen that repeat. I mean, even last year, flooding in the UK was horrific.
Yeah. And then it sort of kind of, I'm sort of trying to think that there's been loads of different incidences. And then there was July 7 bombing in London was another one. And from the inquest from that, surprise, lessons learned, no communication. Yeah. And there was no communications underground. There was a lot of, and you go back to King's Cross, and what was one of the big things there? Communications. No communications underground. And it's just that sort of thing that just leads, there's always something that is bubbling along under the surface. And then we had the recession with cutbacks and budget restraints and things like that. So it's just kept going. And then so go back to where we started with the emergency services show. So I launched Emergency Services Times. We launched the Who's Who in the Emergency Services Directory, which was a collective of listing all the police, fire and ambulance services, plus 2,000 equipment suppliers, all bound together, and it worked absolutely brilliantly.
Which in itself is an extremely valuable list for a lot of people.
Yeah. And then going back to my experience of organising the fire show, it just seemed logic to launch the Emergency Services Show. Yeah. And we've been talking about it in the office for 18 months. And then there was an incident on the Thames where a whale.
I remember it. Yeah, the whale came up.
Yeah, and got unfortunately died. But it was seeing all the different agencies. It was seeing all the different tabards that had police, fire, ambulance, maritime coast guard, sort of mammal rescue, RSPCA, and that was the nucleus for it. It was just it just seemed the right time,
picture in time
to bring it all together. So we launched it in October 2006 at the Royal Horticultural Halls in London in Victoria.
Wow!
And the only windows they had in that time was a Thursday and Friday. Now, who in their wildest dreams would decide to organise an exhibition in the middle of London, Victoria, and finish it on a Friday? But we got away with it. Yeah. We had 100 exhibitors. I think we got about 1,000 visitors to the show. and it was fantastic. And it really, we brought the Salvation Army. They came along, and outside they had one of their tea trucks, and they were handing out cups of tea to everybody. We had Transport for London, the rescue team that if there's a suicide on the underground, they come along and lift the jack the trains up, and that's exactly the same kit that the fire service use.
Yeah.
You know, they use whole matro.
Yeah, a lot of this equipment and the principles behind it. It's just the way in which it's applied. And you said something really interesting about collaboration, because, like you said, that in this past decade alone, it's been like a melting pot of incidents, from environmental to terrorist association or terrorist associated incidents, that has created this eureka moment. And it sounds like you knew viscerally that there was a need for people to do more working together, but you think prior to this we'd always been in real silos, despite the fact that a lot of the equipment had multiple applications.
Exactly. And I think the apprenticeship, I suppose, that I had for it was launching the magazine, and that just went through the roof. It was so popular with equipment suppliers. It was so popular with the readers. So if you think about it, you know, with publishing, the readers are the visitors to the show, and the advertisers are the exhibitors. So it's not rocket science, but you know, we're in contact with them. So why not just bring them along and have a live event? And it's interesting because, again, another milestone for me. I wanted someone to open the show, and because it's multi-agency, it's police, fire, and ambulance. I didn't want to pick someone from government, because then the other, whichever government department, whether it be Department of Health or the DPM or whatever, it would upset the other. Yeah, that's the balance, isn't it? Why haven't you chosen us? So through my dealings, I met a guy from the Met Police who was a family liaison officer, and he was very much involved with the families of the victims of July 7th. And he said, I can put you in contact with Danny Biddle, who's a survivor. And he'd lost both legs and an arm and an eye and whatever. But he said, before I do, this went on for a couple of months. Brilliant. He said, look, we've been in contact with him. He's interested, but he wants to meet you. So I said, oh, okay. He said, he just wants to know what you like and what it's about. So I went to London and Upminster on the underground station. And this guy met me in a wheelchair. And then we went to his car, and he unpacked everything himself. He took himself out the wheelchair, and he drove us to this pub, and we had a pint, and he told me the story. And it was just unbelievable how this guy with what's happened to him, and he had no hatred to the bomber at all. Really, and it was just so humbling. Meeting someone like that, and at the show, so he agreed, and he came on. So he opened the show, and then I did a walk around the hall with him, and we stopped off at Furno stand, and they had like a rail, like a Keystone Cops type rail.
Another ones. To
go on the track. So when the electricity's off, they can. The fire service can and the ambulance service can take kit.
We use them with USAR and urban search and rescue and stuff like that.
That's it. So the salesman was saying, this is what you would have been carried out on from the carriage you were in. And he said, all right. And he said, and this is the stretcher. And he opened this stretcher and it clicked. And Danny just went into a zone. And he said, can you do that again? And he said, and the salesman did it. He said, thank you so much, because I have so many nightmares. Wow. And one of the nightmares was this click. Yeah. And now I can put that to bed.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And he's got those anchors where he's like, absolutely. You don't know where it's coming from.
No. And from the equipment supplier, the exhibitor, they supply all this kit, but they don't know where it's going. No. They don't know what it's like real time.
Yeah.
And here's this rescue guy who was telling them that, and everybody was, it was just an unbelievable moment. And I think it's times like that I feel honoured to put on a show.
Yeah. Because with the greatest of respect to people that exhibit other aspects of business or anything like that, those moments are very, very rare, because the end product in a lot of things can be a monetary value that belongs solely in a business sector, whereas what you do bridges so many gaps between, like we've said, humanity's finest moments and the innovation that takes place and the curiosity that these members of the emergency services and also suppliers have to have comes from such a good place, because the curiosity isn't to drive greater sales profits or anything like that. That'll often be a byproduct, but they've got such a strong driver because what they're doing is trying to help, for example, a paramedic or a frontline worker become safer and more efficient in their day-to-day role. And that is an inspiring purpose, an inspiring why to get them up every day that very few sectors have.
You're so right. And it is getting that balance of having that passion and putting food on the table for my family.
Of course.
Equally serving a fantastic industry, and it's a very, very difficult balance.
It is a difficult balance, but you have to also, and this is why I've found peace with it in the past, when knowing your value, knowing what you do, and knowing that you have a great skill set and that it does provide a great amount of value for other people, and that you should be fairly rewarded for it. Do you know what I mean? I think the fairly is where some people struggle with it sometimes. That's when we get the wrestle of what is more valuable than somebody else's job. For example, a firefighter is just a job. It's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. It's optional. It's not compulsory service like we had once upon a time in the military. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. It's no more valuable necessarily than someone that works at the supermarket. But it does come with a real gift that you can see and make a massive difference in somebody's life every single day. You're given the opportunity.
Yeah, but also it's risk.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Because if I don't sell that stand space, I've still got a massive bill from the venue to host it. I've still got a massive bill for stand building and marketing and offices and staff and things like that. So there is that risk factor as well.
Massive risk factor, because there's not really a return on investment when you're looking at expenditure within the emergency services. We are at large a big insurance policy to a certain extent.
I was just going to say that you're the knights in shining armor when you're wanted, and needed, but you're nothing other than that. Otherwise,
you're just a cost. Otherwise, you're just a cost. Every day you don't save a life, you're potentially a cost. You were a gamble that didn't pay off, which is a horrible way of thinking about it, but ultimately that's what it is. No. So when I say to people, look, we have an opportunity for innovation, and you made a great point about shared learnings when you spoke about some of the collaborations you see in the work that's done at the Emergency Services Show. And I wanted to ask you about the sort of CPD aspect, because one of the things that really surprised me when I first went to one of the shows was the number of subject matter experts and people that give talks that I found really enlightening. I'll be honest, I thought I was going to look at loads of really cool new equipment, and I was quite astonished to see how many people are there from different sectors, and it's like a collision of experience, knowledge and curiosity, and the shared benefits I took away were massive that I now apply in my day-to-day role.
And again, thank you so much for saying that, because you never know whether you're getting it right or not as an exhibition organizer. And we had to put seminar theatres on the floor, on the exhibition floor, because it was getting tougher and tougher for justification for people to get the okay to come to shows.
Yeah.
And it's all a package. So, for example, we launched the show in 2006, and then we took the show up to Stoneleigh Park in Warwickshire, and we had 5 happy years there. We had big growth, and the trouble was the exhibition was always in November. Okay. So the poor exhibitors outside had to contend with snow and ice, rain, dark, wind. And 2011, I think it was, we had a marquee tent and a big storm came along, and we had to close the marquee tent because literally bolts were falling down.
That must have been a painful decision.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrendous. But it was even worse when we had to. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the venue, and we had a health and safety guy.
They
said, "Look, we've got to close it. It's not safe." So I had to stand in front of the doors after we evacuated, not to let anybody in. And I must admit, the lessons for me was the emergency services visitors are just a bunch of liars, because they were just saying anything to try and get in that hall, get their bag, get their keys to their cars.
I've left my free stuff. My free stuff's on the side. I need to. It's essential. And but like when you were there and it was becoming unsafe, you must have thought, hang on a minute. I have got some of the leading experts in safety and innovation. Guys, has nobody got a massive rope or a strop or something? For God's sake, how can we not overcome this? But Mother Nature is a powerful mistress sometimes. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And then afterwards, we were promised by the venue MD that they would. Our decision was, because we're in the long term for the show. We lost about 17% of trading, and we rounded that up to 25% and gave people 25% discounts, which, as an exhibition organizer, if you look at our terms and conditions, we didn't have to do, because storms are in there, and it's natural disasters,
it's act of God or whatever, or force majeure. And so we opted to do the 25%. And the marquee tent supplier, they were absolute scumbags. They walked away from it, even though it was their tent, nothing to do with us. And we were left with this, And anyway, it was the best thing that we actually did, because we then moved the show up to the NEC. And
which is where when I think of the Emergency Service Show, I think of the NEC as its proverbial home anyway. Because
did you not go to any of the shows at Stoneleigh?
No, I didn't go to the showings at Stoneleigh.
Oh, you missed some treats. We had that. What I didn't realise was how much the exhibitors hated Stoneleigh.
Okay.
Every November they used to have a brilliant show, but the car parking was in fields, and tractors had to come along and they were up to axles in the mud. It was horrendous, and it took over an hour. 2 hours to get people out of the car parks and things like that, the queue. And I never saw that because I was in the exhibition hall.
Of course.
And nobody ever said anything. And we send all these questionnaires out. How's the show? The venue? How's the venue for you? The catering, etc., etc. And nobody ever mentions it. And then as soon as we moved up to the NEC, I think it was about all but 2 people who hated the NEC with a vengeance. They said, thank God. I was waiting to see when you were going to move it, David, because that was a nightmare. But like you say, you do something so unique that people were probably just grateful to be able to be there and exhibit at such a fantastic event. But like you said, it wasn't until people don't know what they want until you show them, and then all of a sudden they think, wow, this is exactly.
This is
it. And again, what's interesting is that the things that people don't see from an exhibition organizer. So we had an exploding stand at 4 o'clock in the morning. One of the manufacturers that supplied lifting bags, they had this massive lifting bag which was inflated, and they had chains on each corner of it.
Okay.
Well, 4 o'clock in the morning, the security guards heard this humongous, massive, great big explosion. Went in, and there was no stand. Where this airbag had been, the shell scheme was just scattered in 50p piece size everywhere. This bag was probably about 25 feet away from the actual stand, and it had just missed a brand new ambulance. And I'm convinced that if that had happened in open times,
oh God, somebody had been killed.
We would have had a fatality. And as it happens, the health and safety executive were called in, and they compounded the product, and they looked at this and blah blah blah. But yeah, so there's all things like that you guys come to the show, you just see the shiny bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a tough balance, isn't it? I wanted to ask you again about this CPD aspect, because it's sort of when we said about I speak to a lot of people, certainly in terms of recovery and stuff. We talk about people, places, and things, and we said about how much we enjoy aspects of the emergency services, but then that revelation that actually it's the people. You know what I mean? It's like the chicken and egg analogy. You know, the emergency services attracts amazing people. Well, yes, but the emergency services attracts amazing people because the emergency services is full of amazing people who then make it what it is, and it's like a self-perpetuating organism. Now, when I go to events like that, I feel like having those people there gives me a greater understanding of the things that I see, and I understand the why behind some of the latest innovations through the stories that you see there. Who have been some of the greatest speakers you think you've found there? Because I've read a number of books from the industry and some of the recent ones. Sabrina Hatton-Cohen and people like that who have done some wonderful books off the back of some of the work that you guys have done. Who have been some of your favourites?
I think two, and it's a good question. Two spring to mind. The first one was the Shoreham air crash. So that happened in the August, and we managed to get West Sussex Fire and Rescue to talk about it. Wow. And that was fascinating. That was standing room only. And one of the biggest things that it's funny that there's always odd things that people say that stick into your mind.
Yeah.
And the one with this incident was learning that they were running floodlighting all night. And he said it's not because we were working operationally all night. It was to stop paparazzi going up the River Ada with cameras to take photographs of the side. But it was also to stop foxes and badgers coming along eating body parts. Yeah. And it was just things like that.
Things you don't think about,
It sounds horrendous, and it is horrendous.
But it's a fact. It needs to happen.
And you can. I tell this, or I have told this story to friends and people that aren't involved with the industry, and it's a mixture of how incredible learning that sort of thing. All that's disgusting. Do you know?
But it's a real life problem.
Both parts.
Yeah, we've had a number of incidents in my local area. We had a huge gas explosion a few years ago. And again, when you talk about going through rubble and the problems that you never even think you're going to have when it comes to identifying bodies and going through rubble, and how blasé, and we don't say blasé like nobody cares, but it's the same, that sort of problem for an emergency services operator is no different than somebody in the building sector having to deal with what they would consider an arbitrary incident. But you're dealing with a very delicate subject matter because it involves a fatality and things like that. But that's what I love so much about the Emergency Services Show, is because you discuss things that are very emotive, but they are everyday things in your sector. Does that numb you in any way when you speak to a lot of the exhibitors and go, look, what is it you come in to display? What is it about? And they give you some harrowing story about fatalities or some of the criminal investigations and the things that have resulted from that, and now these new innovations that have to happen. You must be constantly bowled over year on year by the things that come out of the industry.
It is. It's absolutely. And there's some incredible people out there. Just going back to your other question, and this will lead on to this as well. The other presentation we had that sticks out in my mind is we managed to get one of the British divers who were involved with the Thai football team. Do you remember they got stuck in a cave?
Yes. That was a really big incident for a week or so. I remember reading about that. Yeah.
So I'd read that the British Cave Rescue were instrumental in that, but they were doing it from the UK.
Okay.
And one of the unique things that I've always done with the exhibition is, from the very first year, I had to think of something different to set us up, instead of just being equipment suppliers exhibiting, I give an area to end users. Okay. And, that could be Mountain Rescue, it could be Salvation Army, RNLI, it could be, because I recognise that there's team building that needs going on.
Yes.
And the police, fire and ambulance need to speak to these people to see what capabilities they've got.
Yeah.
You think Red Cross, they displayed their incident command unit.
I've seen things with the heart teams and with like a virtual reality team and all that sort of stuff. It's real end-line users. And how can this wonderful thing be implemented? And you go, well, here's an example of something you may know very little about, but is a wonderful resource that we have at our disposal in the UK.
Yeah, but also when you're in a training exercise, remember these guys.
Yeah.
Because they play a major part. The police are getting more, because their budgets are getting more and more cut up. They rely on lowland rescue like anything.
I know, and that's predominantly a voluntary service.
Yeah, but often those lowland rescue teams know the area far better than the police do. So why not give it to the local community who know it?
Yeah,
and I think PCCs are beginning to pick this up, and they're beginning to fund the vehicle and fund equipment and a drone and thermal image cameras and things like that.
Because if you can take your mind out of the cost initially, if you extrapolate that number out and the amount of resources you would need to deploy to gain that level of knowledge, it really is. It becomes obvious then. But I imagine time gone past, we probably wasted a tremendous amount more money. That's where all these cuts are horrible, but it forces a lot of efficiencies.
Oh. Yeah, and to me, we call it the collaboration zone, but that's my crown jewels of the show.
Really?
Because nobody else, and a lot of other exhibition organisers, they don't get it because I give this stand space free of charge. And they just don't, and they haven't got second-hand shell scheme or rubbishy decorating tables and things like that. They've got the same equipment as the paying people.
Yep.
And we have deals with the with the exhibition or the stand builders to supply the equipment to us. But even so, it's and that's what is so unique about the show, that it brings literally everybody together.
Yeah.
I was just there was the Shoreham Airport. And the Thai one. And again, how I got the Thai one was that British Cave Rescue, I always give a free stand.
Okay.
And because I've read that they were involved with helping the Thai, I thought it's payback time. I'll give a phone call and,
absolutely. Come on, it's favours.
Yeah, and see whether they can help. And the only problem was with my enthusiasm, I rang when the rescue was still going on. And Bill's wife answered the phone.
Hi guys, can you just do me a favour, please?
It's Bill there. He said, no, he's a bit busy at the moment. Well, do you know who it is? It's David.
Tell him it's David.
Yeah, and she really gave me a flea in my ear and get lost boy.
Well. They're the stories you'll tell.
So I left it a week, and then I thought I'll be sneaky. I'll ring him at night. So I rang him at 8 o'clock, and he answered his phone.
So your partner's not around, is she? Because I need to ask a favour.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to talk to you, David.
Any chance of getting one of the divers?
Can you just?
Well, look, one of them's former West Midlands Fire Service, and we managed to get it. And to me, I get as excited at setting something like that up as I do selling a stand.
Yeah.
And a stand could be 4 square metres, or it could be 60 square metres. I get the same satisfaction, and it's like...
I would argue, I don't know, and I'm just sheer curiosity here, I personally feel like I would get more excitement from the small people, because often you find the small ones are hungry, because we'll be there this year, hopefully, speaking with yourself and stuff like that. And it's the young startups or the people that have that small business mentality where they are up against it, or it's the David versus Goliath, and they desperately know that they have value and they have a product or a purpose that it can really sincerely help people on the front line, but trying to be heard amongst the noise against some of these big players must be so difficult. You must see some people really struggle.
and it is, and you do try and give as much information and much help. You know, if sometimes I will just stand in the middle of the entrance hall, and I'll randomly go up to someone and say, "Hi, thank you so much for coming to the exhibition. What are you here for? Is there any particular bit of kit that you're after?" And he'll say, "Yeah, I'm after X, Y, Z." So I will actually take them to that stand, and make that introduction, and then lead them to it.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a nice personal touch.
100%.
To
shows a lot of authenticity as well,
and
because you've been there yourself when all the pessimists were telling you the emergency services shows stupid idea. You need to pick a lane. Who are you helping? Come on, where's your allegiances and all this sort of stuff. And you know what it's like to be that person struggling to get something good off the ground.
The one thing that has made me really struggle is when we went into Hall 5, which is the largest hall of the NEC, which is where we are now, because that hall, when you see it empty,
it's a scary space.
It is a scary space. And all of a sudden, it's my responsibility to fill it.
Yeah.
And yes, I've got sales team and I've got marketing team, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, of course.
But that hall has probably put me in my shell a little bit, because it's such a frightening thing, because corner to corner, it's a quarter of a mile long.
Jesus.
Can you imagine that?
Quarter of them. I've been to like some Amazon warehouses and stuff like that, so I have an appreciation for the size of what you're describing. But like to go in there every single year, it must stare at you in its daunting silence and almost provoke you and invite you to come and dance with it.
But then you go in and as I say, it's all about team. I've got a fantastic team. I've got Les, who's on the ops side.
Yeah.
No one messes with Les. Everything's done, and she is absolutely amazing. And in her real life, she helps out with the Samaritans. How cool is that?
Which I imagine she probably tells nobody about. They're always the sort of people who are just so unassuming. And this is the whole idea of the podcast. It's those unsung heroes that aren't in it for ego or gratification. Yeah. And she sounds exactly one of them people.
Yeah, and I've got a fantastic business partner, David Holden. We sold the company in August 2019.
Really?
And really, it was one of the biggest decisions the pair of us ever took, to recognise that we'd taken the show as far as we could. And there were certain skill factors that we didn't have, like employing staff and taking it up to the next level.
Yeah.
And so we sold out to a company called 19 Group, who are private equity owned, Phoenix Equity, and they've been fantastic. The CEO Peter Jones, he has got enthusiasm for exhibitions and belief in exhibitions. There's great experience from Alison Jackson, who's the group MD, and it couldn't have been a better marriage, really. And the other shows that they organise. International Security Expo at Olympia, the security event, fire safety event, which is really interesting because fire safety is obviously, for me, it's the Grenfell.
Yeah,
and it's everything that went wrong with the building, and that's a really good fit with our facilities, which we mentioned earlier. How important buildings are for the emergency services, health and safety events, and main tech. And really, that we've been approached by a number of other organisations, but it was the 19 vision and it's the 19 enthusiasm, and we just fit in with it like a glove. And so this year's show, in September, we're co-located with 4 other events, which I'm really, really excited about.
Oh, crikey, that would be fantastic for you guys, and almost like I imagine you've been able to recruit a lot more support in essence of that as well. But I do want to acknowledge, because I appreciate how challenging that must have been, and you have to sort of sacrifice a lot of pride when you come to that moment of realization, like you said, about taking it as far as you can go. And this is where, because I've had this experience with businesses in the past, where it's not about anybody being better or worse than anybody, and it's so hard to see past that, to see that, oh, no, I could do that. But what you forget, and what I kind of learned in a couple of different ways, was that you are not best positioned to do what they're doing, but the same is the same in reverse, as in they could perhaps not do what you have done as well. You have that startup hungry mentality. And I'm great like that. I'm great in a war zone. Do you know what I mean? I'm great in the trenches. I'm great at the turning up at 3 a.m. and getting it done, and I've got a good appetite for risk. Whereas past a certain point, that becomes destructive. That becomes a bit of a barrier, because you become, I operate best in stress, but a lot of people don't want to live in a stressful environment on a day-to-day basis, and, working with clients and trying to get them up at 4 a.m. to get after it and push hard. And people are like, that's not sustainable though, Pete. Do you know what I mean? Some people need a little bit of more balance in their life rather than just go, go, go.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's a young person's game, organising exhibitions. They're stressful. Yeah. And it's you do worry. You worry about the exhibitor is paying a lot of money for that stand, and you want it to deliver. Yeah. And I take it personally that every negative event I get, oh God, and that's why I want to work it really hard and try and get the right visitors there. It's interesting because a few years ago, I think it was one of the first shows we had at the NEC. There was the fire strike. And actually it started on the first day in the afternoon.
Really?
And
that's horrendous timing.
But one particular company, which I will not mention by name, withdrew from the show for about 3 or 4 years because of that strike. And it was nothing to do with me. No. We organised it, and you can't change the dates of the venue or anything. And I find really, really tough dealing with people like that are
because again, with all due respect, some services and brigades, and maybe some sectors, or don't appreciate the cost and thing that's gone into that, and they don't appreciate that someone else has also in a very difficult time. So that's the time when you need to pull together, because you're not the problem. You should be together. Let's find the solution to it. But when people step back and they go, no, I'm taking my ball home, and you're like, well, I don't represent the problem, but we're still here. It's got to carry on, guys. It's got to carry on. People, I'm not playing anymore, and you're like, well, come on, there's a sour taste in your mouth for the years to come, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, there goes what you just said about the future. Look, COVID's going to be very, very tough. We haven't been able to organise a show since September 19, so we've had no revenue coming through at all. Yet the support we've had from exhibitors staying with us and committed to us is just absolutely phenomenal. And equally, I really want the support from you people, from emergency service personnel. You don't owe it, but in some ways you do, to support the market. The supply chain is so important, and with all the problems you have, you can't solve them without equipment suppliers.
This is where the solutions are going to come from. So be interested, pull up a seat at the table, show your interest, show your enthusiasm for it. Because I love what you said there about the exhibitors giving their support, because I imagine in this industry now, it gives you a real thick skin in terms of being a supplier or an exhibitor for the industry, because you've got to have that long-term mindset. And it's so difficult for people now, especially in this pandemic, because of the continued extensions of restrictions and not knowing when it's going to end. But it is going to end. It is going to pass. At some point, in some way or another, we are all, in a manner, going to come out the other end of this. And the relationships and the damage that's been sustained during this time will not be forgotten. We can move past the physical restrictions now, but we've got to stick together with things like this. Otherwise, what is it all been for?
Yeah, but the appetite for it from equipment suppliers wanting that, they can't go and see their customers.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. And likewise, our registration systems up and running, and the amount of people that are registering for the show is fantastic. But you imagine what it was like last year when pubs were opened and everybody's absolutely swarm pubs.
Yeah.
And the eating, everybody was out eating and things like that. It's human nature that a human being wants to speak to a human being. They want to touch their hand.
We're social animals. That's how we exchange dopamine, oxytocin. We want to have that.
And that is no different to when shows come, open up.
Yeah.
And we don't know what a show's going to look like.
No.
Nobody does yet. But the industry, on behalf of equipment suppliers and the exhibitors, we need the support from the clients, the users, and it's already coming out from the Grenfell fire that some of the criticisms, some of the problems that the firefighters had with not being able to hear in the BA, the communication system, and the BA manufacturers are bringing out solutions for it now. They listen.
100%. I've seen some of the comm systems built into the lung demand valves and into the headsets and stuff like that. It's some fantastic. I actually think when you guys come back this year, it will be the greatest show we've ever seen, because we've had such
on a party. I'll tell you that.
It's been such a prolonged period where so much has happened, and these people, while we may not have seen all of the suppliers and exhibitors and stuff like that, they've not been sitting at home doing nothing. These people have been busy in the background, and we talk about some of the current trends that have been emerging in the market, because there's been a storm of things continuing, because emergency services has been one of the few things which has still been out there on the front line non-stop. We have not had days off. We've been there all the time, and all this has been happening behind the scenes. So what have been the biggest sort of trends? Because you'll be hearing it. I know you stay in regular contact with a lot of people. There's some massive trends emerging now. There's some big things happening.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, we've launched future policing at the show, because the police was always a quiet area for us. So, and there's just huge things happening with the police force, and technology is just massive.
Yeah.
And that's just going to revolutionise the way not only the police,
everything in society, because we've got such amazing innovations happening, and now what's happening, these are colliding. Do you know what I mean? We're having GPS collide with, virtual reality colliding with other technological innovations and social media and connectivity. And all of this is spitting out some incredible things in the market.
But that is one good thing of COVID, because it quickened it up and quickened that process. Sustainability and environment is a huge thing with electric vehicles. And
absolutely.
We've got, and at the moment it's big with the ambulance service, and the fire service, and obviously the police. But it's still that problem of how long the batteries go for, the recharging, the problems that you have in stations. Where do you recharge the space to recharge? So that there are some problems, but it won't be too long before solutions come along, because it's
these
not
solutions,
go away.
They're already there. It's just making them accessible for the mass market. Because we look again on a micro scale from, if I just think back to things like hydraulic equipment, up until 2 or 3 years ago, and still in some services across the UK and globally, they'll still be using hydraulic road traffic collision equipment. And now, we saw 5 years ago or so the surge of hydraulics, which are now widely available.
The battery-operated ones. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just a larger scale of that. When I look at companies like Venari and stuff like that, and the steps they're trying to take in being that leader, and we know the first version of most things is never the perfect product, but we've seen electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles are mass market, from your Teslas and stuff in the private sector. So it will not be that long until the why and the drive behind it brings them into our public sector. And I know it will be companies like Venari and many others out there that are really pushing forward to lead that.
But again, these vehicles, they're like mobile officers.
Yeah.
And the technology that's in there, and it's the connectivity that is there now.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant. And the likes of Accelerate and the Benzes of this world, and they're getting there. And with ambulance services, there's new names like MAN and Fiat coming into the market.
I've certainly seen a lot of our carryover from the work in the paramedics, because when we're out on the appliances now, we've got all of our mobile data terminals, and like you've said, a lot of the work that we would have to wait to get back to station to support and take action on a vulnerable person, or to be able to support somebody that we've found an incident or a risk or a building that isn't safe, we can fill out the reports. Technology is there with us now, and there's no delay in our ability to get other resources on the road and en route now, rather than waiting to get back and fill in a report on some archaic system.
Yeah, and just learning from one another.
Yes, 100%.
Share that information. That's all it is. But another massive thing that's going to be in the future is mindfulness, and the stress and the strains that the emergency services and the sites they've seen, which has just been consistent. There's been no let off from it.
No, I think in many ways it's been worse. Absolutely, because we've had to be there, experience it, and onboarding that trauma. I first did training with mental health first aiders probably 2 or 3 years ago, and seeing the shared learnings of things like TRIM. TRIM's come from obviously initially the military, and then the police have adopted it, and now our ability to support our frontline workers with traumatic experiences and upgrading them. When we talk about CPD again, the mental health aspect of it is wonderful, that it's now being seen as important as PPE and other aspects to the health and wellness of a frontline worker.
Yeah, and there are some brilliant organisations like the Firefighters charity, what they support or how they support the fire and rescue service. There's an individual guy called Andy Elwood who does Andy's Landy. He's spoken at the show for a couple of years, and we did a mental health webinar with him last October.
He's a fantastic guy.
But his history, he's an ex Coast Guard winchman, rescue winchman. He's an ex paramedic with the army, so he's seen the sights in Afghanistan, and he's had his own breakdowns, and it was suddenly a eureka moment that he's had all this experience, and he's thrown himself into being a mental health first aider and doing a brilliant job. And he just, I'd take my hat off to people like that. Yeah,
this is where, and I'd be interested to hear when you see the differences in ego and or level of importance, because I find when we talk about the people and people that come and present at your shows, because the people that people are most interested in aren't often the leaders of brands or the wealthiest of the people with the money in the room are very rarely the ones people are interested in. I think it's lovely to see people that have demonstrated wonderful leadership and stoicism in their frontline job being the ones that are the ones helping us. They're the ones teaching, they're the ones sharing their learnings and their experiences. It's very unique in that respect, because it's not like a lot of other shows where the wealthiest or quote unquote most successful person in the room is given kudos and hats off to them, and they get the front row seats. This is something so unique where people are rewarded and recognized for often sacrifices.
Yeah, and I have my own skeletons in the closet and have my own mindfulness problems, and I'm very, very lucky that I've got the daughter Rebecca, who is a brilliant yoga teacher. And if anybody wants to have a go at yoga, you can go on her Nature's Healing by Becca YouTube website, and she's got some free lessons on there. And yoga for mindfulness, it's not only stretching your bodies and look
I
at
do it all the time.
Giggs.
Yeah, me and my daughter do yoga
Giggs.
on a daily basis.
Oh, really?
It's really, really important. Yeah, I teach it to clients and stuff like that. It's essential.
Yeah, it's just getting out, and if anybody hasn't done it, the first time you do it, it's really tough.
I don't think it ever stops being tough. People have a preconceived notion of yoga that it's all about, holding your hands and saying om or something. It's not like that at all. It's gone through some fantastic innovations that make it very accessible to people who even feel like they've got little to no flexibility. Is very accessible for people. And like you've said, the what you get from it mentally, the stillness and being present in the moment in such a distracted world that we live in now, it's a really, really crucial aspect. I think that's where the pandemic has been kind to us in the fact that it's forced us into some stillness and into some personal reflections.
There's some really good teachers out there, and it can do it online. It equates to being done 100%. Online.
I wanted to finish by asking you about some of the supply chain aspects that you've had, some of the challenges that have been faced with getting stuff into the UK, but also continuing to support the front line as our requirements in terms of PPE and the things that have changed. What difficulties you've seen emerge in that?
Well, it's really interesting because COVID has developed this really weird world that we live in. And only last week you saw a huge brand of MSA buying Bristol uniforms. And that was a real shock. But from an MSA point of view, brilliant move. It's no doubt a brilliant move for Bristol uniforms. And I think over the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions and consolidation in the marketplace. That's a given. They seem to be. There's another company, Safeguard Medical, that acquired Prometheus Medical and Water Gel. It's happening all the time, and hopefully it'll be stronger for the marketplace too.
I think it will be. Companies like Bristol have had a long-standing. They've got that depth and experience in the market, but such a tremendous global leader like MSA. And I had conversations with some of the team the other day. It's been a really smart move, and they don't pretend to be the experts in the industry. They recognize the value that Bristol has, because many companies are just going under and then someone else is popping up to do the same sort of thing. Whereas it looks in this situation, and I say from a limited understanding, MSA have really recognized the role that Bristol have played in PPE, and they've played such a crucial role. It's wonderful to see that they'll continue to do so, and they've got a place that they can find a way to continue after all this.
I referred to 1988 when I first started having the privilege of working with the Fire and Rescue Service, and Bristol were an advertiser, but they still had the old coal trousers, do you know? and the yellow leggings and the cork helmet. And it's been such a journey seeing the technology now, and a lot of it has come from space. Sort of that rocket coming back.
Well, I spoke to I think it was Ian Callaghan from PBI recently, and he tells me, he speaks of how a lot of these innovations came from some of the work that was some of the astronauts, and how that was the origin of what we see today in a lot of our fire kit, which I thought was amazing. When you really learn that, people are like, oh my god, that's amazing. And the DuPont range of products and things like that, they all come from space age, and that's how NASA make their money by selling the byproducts of space. And it's no different to the Formula One cars. How what goes into those cars? You'll see. You'll see the flippy gear change 2 or 3 years later, you see it emerge in the public sector, and that level of tip of the spear, innovation is what we can all benefit from. And I know off the back of these horrendous times, we will see more and more of those innovations come to the forefront that have helped keep people alive during this difficult time. And no doubt it will be at the Emergency Services Show where we see those things displayed.
I hope so. But the other thing that I'm focusing on at the moment, really, is the UK's critical national infrastructure, which, of course, pandemics was part of. And you've got cyber terrorism. You've got all sorts of things out there.
Yeah, what a beast that is. Crikey.
Growing will have effect on everybody, all the emergency services, and how you respond to them. So, it's a really exciting period ahead. The emergency services need to upskill their workforce.
Yes, I very much agree with that. And
technology is coming in.
Yeah, how do we continue to invest in people's leadership abilities? Because now more than ever, I feel like we can't afford to continue to have managers in the roles. We need to be finding more innovative ways to develop leadership, and we need to swallow a bit of pride and look into the private sector and learn from some of the wonderful leaders that we see outside of the public sector. Because I think we spend so long at the coalface, we can sometimes miss out on some of these development opportunities.
Yeah, I think so. And above all, it's being flexible. That's the big thing. And there are going to be changes, but don't stay in silos. Share with other forces. And
I think my education and my development has absolutely catapulted since beginning the podcast and being able to speak to, people from the police and chiefs within the paramedics and military and, inspectors, and my appreciation and understanding puts me in greater stead when I'm doing my operational task. But a lot of that, you're going to have to do a certain element of it in your free time. You've got to be interested. It can't be a professional obligation. It's got to be a passion. And I think that's hopefully where we will be lucky enough that most people operating in the emergency services, there is at least some, in some cases, a lot of passion still in the job. So people are always willing to give that little bit more.
But ultimately, and I know it's a horrible thing to say, the blue light industry needs disasters. It needs incidents just to justify your existence, and you'll grow from it. And you are such an important part of the social society that we live in.
Absolutely. And I know we'll be continue to have challenges to face, and I look forward to being best prepared through hopefully a lot of the things we'll see in September. So just remind us again.
And I'll have the red carpet for you.
I can't wait. Don't get it out for me, mate. It'll be a waste. I'll be rocking up in a big pair of boots. That's me. So September, NEC.
It's the NEC Birmingham, 7th and 8th of September. And to register, www.emergencyuk.com. Free entry, free parking, and you've got access to 4 other shows as well. So it's going to be a big show.
You must bring your own optimism and interest, guys. They can't do it all for you. Come on. It's out there. David, thank you so much for taking time out of your valuable day to have a conversation with me. I really appreciate it, brother. Look after the family, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Well, there we have it, boys and girls. That was David Brown, and he is Event Director, Emergency Services Show. And a really interesting dude, to be honest with you. I've had a couple of conversations previous to that with David, and we've spoken since recording the podcast. Such a fantastic guy. Really cherishes and really values, his family and his teamwork. And I know we only spoke briefly on there about some of the aspects of teamwork. David is well aware he is only part of a massive, massive team of really powerful and resourceful and innovative individuals who have really taking the Emergency Services Show to where it is. Now, once again, you will see all of the show notes underneath this one. So just in the show more button, just below, drop down in there, you'll see the links to the Emergency Services Show. You'll see all the information, anything we've spoken about today. If you want to get in contact with the Emergency Services Show, you'll find out how to do it there. If you're an exhibitor, if you want support from David, if you want to check out the yoga, those notes will be in there, guys. Thank you once again for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. I really hope to see you there in September. I will be there front row, kicking ass and taking names and speaking to some of the incredible people out there, trying to get the frontline information, trying to get it hot off the press of what's happening in the emergency services, not only UK, but worldwide. Thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon, right here on the Firefighters Podcast.